Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon. Picture for a moment a mantle clock of many years in age that once perhaps sat on your grandparents' mantle, but then went into a box when the house was taken apart and no one could quite see any value in it because it wasn't ticking anymore. That is a find for Gage Robertson. That's something that would excite his interest. And then as he looks at it, perhaps on Facebook where it's portrayed for sale, you'll see, no, that is a real antique, and he will purchase it. And he will bring it back to life. And that's a hobby with a great big H. And it also has become something that he can return some of his own investment of time and talent by selling these completely restored clocks that used to sit in a box in your garage from grandma's house back in the day. So this is going to be a fun conversation and very much in line with two others that I've had in this podcast series. One with someone who started repairing V8 engines and reselling them before he was 17. And also someone who has become a very proficient copy editor and proofreader for my book on practice as a way of being. And she plays the accordion, and she is 17. So yeah, I'm probably going to look for another 17-year-old, which is pretty wonderful. But so far, I'm giving you three examples of where practice gets its roots in the teen years or even younger, and then they continue to grow through a lifetime. This is Gage Robertson. I was just telling Gage Robertson about a pattern that he's becoming part of. The pattern being that I keep finding these incredibly interesting 17-year-old business people or people who have high intention to do things that we sometimes think, in quotes, kids will wait for a long while before they'll undertake. Like, for example, Gage's clock repair. So there's so many things I want to know, Gage, but let's start with, I have to tell you, I almost came to you with a bad, a bad dad joke. I was going to say, there are kids your age who spend all their time listening to TikTok, and you, Gage, actually listen to TikTok.
I haven't heard that one yet.
Ba-dum-bum, ba-dum-bum.
Pretty good, actually.
That's my bad dad joke. Even your father wouldn't risk that pun. Well, maybe he would. But of all things, particularly since digital has become so prominent, mm-hmm. What attracted you to old clocks? And when?
So I would have to say when I was very little, when we first moved into this house, and Susie, who's my dad's fiance, they first got together. She had an old clock that had been passed down in her family for years. And it was in the dining room for many years. It was actually kind of stored away in a cabinet, and it didn't work. And I was always fascinated with it ever since we moved in. And I would say it was about 3 years ago that we finally decided to take it to a clock repair shop and have him look at it. It's actually Standish Clock Repair right down the road. You can probably look it up if you want. Mm-hmm. And he estimated it was going to be $300 to fix it. And
wow.
So we didn't want to pay the money. I was kind of bummed out. I was like, oh, we can't get it fixed. And because Susie was like, oh, it's too much money. So we ended up forgetting about it and we left it at his shop.
Oh, you left it there and thinking he might come down on his price at some point.
Well, no, it was just we forgot to pick it up. We just completely forgot.
This is a hell of a good story. The grandfather clock that was left at the shop.
It's like a mantle clock kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a small mantle clock. So we forgot about it. And then a couple months after we first brought it there, we got a call saying, "Hey, your clock is fixed. You're ready for pickup." And we're like, "Wait, we didn't agree to that." we said we didn't want to go through with that. So he realized his mistake, and he took half price off what he originally quoted us, so 150 instead of 300. And we paid him that, and it's happily ticking away to this day in our living room. And that was kind of the start of this fascination with antique clocks for me, I think.
Did you go down to the shop and sort of poke around in the dusty corners? It
was pretty soon after that I started making routine visits there, and nice. I still do to this day. I've become very good friends with Jim. It's a shop. It's run by him and his son. His son does the watches, and he does the antique clocks. So like the big grandfather clocks and the mantle clocks and stuff like that. So
now, that business inherited? Is it something that they've kept going from decades before, or did Jim start it?
I think he started it, if I'm not mistaken. To tell you the truth, I've never actually asked him how he got into clock repair. I believe prior to doing clock repair, he actually had a restaurant or something along those lines. Yeah. So he's been doing it for a couple of years now. I think he tried to start, doing the whole business out of his own home, but West Hartford wouldn't let him run it out of his home. They said you have to have a formal shop, So he ended up getting a the physical store down the road. Forget the actual address. It's right across the street. Oh, it's actually right next door to J. Renee Coffee. Do you know where that is?
Oh yeah. But I don't get down there much, and if I do, the next time I'm going to poke my head in and tell them that I have a podcast star who frequents his place. So let's think about the context. Since you're going to be studying history at the University of Hartford in the fall, congratulations.
Thank you.
At first, I asked the question because I thought that clock repair as a business, a profitable business, would go way back when a lot of us had wind-up clocks and watches, for that matter, that weren't digitized or electronics, and therefore it sort of came down through succession. But now I'm getting a different sense of it. Maybe you would agree about this. Folks may not know, who listen to this, in Australia, that West Hartford is a very old town, very old small city, but it also has a lot of old homes and people who have the affluence or they've inherited mantle clocks of that quality. And I can't think of anywhere, I should have Googled it in advance, where you can go and have a really good clock like Susie's clock repaired for less than $300.
Yep.
And so there is an opportunity. It's a tiny niche, but from a business standpoint, it sounds like he and his son and with you are getting it going. But now I want to talk about Gage Robertson. What about those tiny little instruments and getting inside, opening up the back? Are you actually making clocks tick again?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, I see each antique clock as a time capsule and something that at one point, especially when it was new, was like a prized possession in someone's life. And I think each clock deserves to have its story continued and to allow it to continue just existing on this planet. I'm on Facebook all the time, and I'll see posts of people who retrieved an antique clock from the dumpster that like an estate sale, they cleaned it out and they just threw it out because they didn't see the value in it. But I think, I think I'll get a clock, and I actually prefer to buy the clocks that no one else would buy, that are like really, really damaged and really, really beat up.
Wow.
And they may take a long time to restore, but it's worth it to me in the end, just because I love seeing them, make a comeback. Like, hey, you were you were constructed to last. So I'm going to make sure that happens.
Oh, that's a real mission, and I love the part that each clock has a story. Whether you get to actually know its story in a way, I sense that you pick up on the story. You can imagine if a clock had sat on a mantle for 100 years, how many family conversations, how many in our little part of the world, they used to have. If someone passed away, they would put the casket right in a room where there was probably a mantle clock, and they'd be mourning the loss of a loved one. And all the while, that clock was ticking along until it didn't. It's till it stopped. and I know, since I've told a bad dad joke, that you know the song, "The Grandfather's Clock." I
think so. Yes.
The grandfather's clock goes tick tock tick, and then the clock struck never to,
Yeah.
So I feel that way too, and I feel what you're doing in the world right now. But now let's talk about the actual mechanical work of making, particularly a beat up old clock, new again and work. I would assume it takes quite a bit of patience and a really good dexterity.
Yes.
Let's talk about fixing one of the real junkers. Until now, it's like out there ready to tick again.
Well, so each clock, it could come to me in various different, conditions. The worst type of condition is it's like dusty and it's also worn out. I had a clock once that was sitting in a family farmhouse for over 100 years and was barely used. And the movement was, it was brass and steel, and it was so dirty that you couldn't even see the brass or the steel. It was just, the whole thing was brown. And there was like these piles, like physical piles of like dust on it. Yeah. So those, you have to put a lot of work into to make them, cleaned up. Big caution with these antique clocks is, believe it or not, they're actually quite dangerous because, or the spring wound ones are, especially the American ones. You have to make sure that you release the power on the spring before you disassemble the movement. And that's a whole process in its own, because if you don't let down the power on the spring and you just go straight to taking the bolts of the plate off and taking the gears out, it will explode. And you could have severe lacerations all over your body. If you go on any, clock repair website, the first thing they'll say is, make sure you release the power on the springs or else you will hurt yourself. So
there's a nice analogy there for something else, but the power of the spring and how, and how latent that power is. I mean, it looks so innocent, right? Just curled in there.
It does.
Get all the dust cleared away, and there it is.
Yeah.
And it's ready to spring. Maybe that's where that came from too. But now, as you're doing that, though, how did you learn that part? Did the folks down at the shop teach you about the first and foremost rule, which is release the power of the spring, or did you go on YouTube, or how did you self-learn?
I think the majority of my starting knowledge in this hobby was probably from YouTube, I would say.
Okay.
And I learned a lot from YouTube, as well as, the clock shop nearby. He told me about how to let down the power on the springs. And, but yeah, YouTube was a big learning point for me, for sure. Yep.
There are a lot of posts out there on YouTube, and people want to help.
Yeah, believe it or not,
antique clock world.
Yeah, believe it or not, there actually is. There's one guy I watch. His name is James Martin. His YouTube channel is called James Martin Clock Repair, and he's based in Washington State. And he's kind of like a clock repair idol for me, because he's an older man, and you can tell he's been doing this work for a long time. And the way he records his videos, he captures every detail of the work that he does in a way that you can really pick up on it and learn from him, how he goes about doing those repairs. Yeah. So when I first started clock repair, I watched his channel like nonstop. And that's where I learned a lot of how how to let down the power and all that stuff. So
what is it about his way of being? Because this is the theme, and practice as a way of being is actually the primary title of my book. But
Mhm.
what is it about him when he's recording this that drew you to him and kept you very interested, not just in the technical part, but his way of basically teaching what he was doing?
He is just a very calm and patient and just a very detail oriented person. I would say every video he starts off with, he has a voiceover the whole video, like he records it on his microphone after he's actually filmed it.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and he'll start off, he'll show you the clock, like the project he has, and he'll explain the origins of it, the model name, the history of it, and then he'll gradually get, more and more detailed as the video progresses. And, finally you'll get to the stage where, because like he'll have a different angle for each step of the process. So you'll see one angle of him, the clock that he has, and he's like, so today I received this clock in the mail, and it was sent to me from a man in Idaho or whatever. And the next shot will be inside the case and him unscrewing the movement from the case, and then the next one will be him inspecting it, and he'll have like a little screwdriver. You'll see him explaining each part of the movement and what needs to be done, and how he has just an intuitive way of looking at a movement and being like, okay, so I kind of know what this movement has been through based off of the condition it's in now.
Wow.
Like he'll talk about like he'll get a movement that's really dirty, and he'll see this kind of like tar substance on there, and he'll be like, well, back in the day, a lot of people smoked.
A lot of smokers, yeah.
And that smoke would kind of coat everything in your house, including your lungs. And that's actually like a quote from one of his videos. And you can see him explain that on the movement, because you'll see, he'll zoom in on like the winding arbor or something, and there's like this like greenish residue or something. So
that is incredible. Now, so what he helped you see is that every clock has a story, which we started with.
Yes.
But when he gets in, you see him assessing the movements regarding whether they should be fixed or replaced. Is part of the work saying, look, this one is just it's too worn and it won't have a future. So there are some things that you have to replace, right?
I guess,
well, maybe not. Maybe it's because they're brass and steel. You don't have to.
I guess some people's mindset would be, you could replace it, but I think his mindset is you fix it no matter what, and he'll fix it. Yeah. So that's the kind of mindset I really, appreciate.
I like that mindset. In fact, I just projected on you the whole commercial scandal of the world. If you replace it, don't even try to repair it. And of course, I grew up in Maine, where we like your dad was in New Hampshire. We valued every penny. We made if you could get more than one use out of something, you would do it. So I kind of grew up with that ethos. But coming out to the real world here over the many years that I've lived out here, I've seen that throwaway culture. And I'm so excited to see that you have chosen not to follow that trend, at least when it comes to clock repair. Yeah.
Yes. If I can't fix a movement and the gears are beyond my repair, like if there was a gear tooth that broke off and it's a metal movement, like I just don't have the tools to repair that gear, I'll save pretty much every part that I come across, and I can use it in another movement in the future. That's how I look at it. Because they're not making any more of them. So every time you cross a parts movement or something, like it would almost be, in my mind, it almost be like a crime to throw it out once you got one part from it, because there's literally like each movement has dozens of parts on just one movement that you could use in a future project. So
you're do you have a spot in your room with all of these spare parts, or have you commandeered a corner of the house?
Commandeered is probably the best word. It's kind of funny, actually. My dad, when we moved in, he still does. He has a furniture making hobby, and he made a beautiful wood shop in the basement, and it's a huge wall length workbench that he put in, and I kind of took it over. So he's just happy that it's being used. And
I'm sure.
I have clocks kind of lined up on the workbench, and I try, like, I'll clear a workbench and I'll be like, hey, you guys have this space now. You guys can work on your projects, like my brother and my dad. And then like 2 days later, I have it filled up with stuff again. And they'll be like, hey, why'd you put stuff on here? You just cleared this off for us.
Well,
So,
this gets to the business aspect of your work, because if clocks are appearing on that bench, it means that people have said, Gage, I'd like you to repair my clock. So that's business, right?
well, most of the clocks I get, believe it or not, are actually ones that I purchase and then try to resell.
Ah, well, that's business too,
Yes.
because those clocks are not, only a replica would look at all like any of the clocks you're selling. So you're putting something back out into a marketplace, which particularly likes antiques. I mean, it's a big part of the antique world is here in New England, particularly in Connecticut. So that's a smart business move. So you find them, fix them, and then you sell them. So first, how do you find them?
So it mostly through Facebook Marketplace. Sometimes I'll find clocks on eBay. That's like when I first started clock repair, I wasn't really sure where to get antique clocks. So I just kind of was getting most of my clocks off eBay. But as I've, learned more, I've realized that Facebook Marketplace is the best option because people will list clocks on Facebook Marketplace every day. And you can find, and I have an eye for like what's reproduction, what's junk, and then like what's the actual thing that I should, focus on acquiring. So and I'll always make sure it's the right price. So I'll knock off a bunch of categories on my head, like, okay, so this is antique. Is what work does it need? Does it have all the case parts? Is it missing anything on the interior? Is there like a broken spring? And then, I'll make an offer, but most of the time I can get really good price. I don't usually pay over $30 for antique clock at this point.
That's a really good business move.
Most of the clocks I get $20.
Where did this eye come from? This eye for the right choice among all those possible options?
I think I just kind of got used to, figuring out what is antique and what isn't. And I'm able to kind of just, I don't know, I'm able to see a clock and I can pretty much just tell you if it's an antique or not. I'll look, there's one thing that's very indicative of an antique clock is the piece that holds the hands on the face of a clock.
A little screw thing.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's a screw, but most of the time, 85% of the time, it's a pin. So if I see a listing on Facebook Marketplace and I think it looks antique, but I'm not really sure, the first thing I'll look at is what's holding the hands on. And if there's a pin instead of like a screw or something like that, then that's how I know that it's an antique and it's worth my time. So
that's the find. And then we talked a bit about the fix, but let's now talk about how you get them back out and make some profit on your work. What's your selling process?
So most of the time I sell on eBay and I can usually get decent prices for them. It can be hard sometimes, I will say, it's tough to find a market. But I had a friend, or not a friend, a former teacher of mine from my art school that I just graduated from, who started his own antique store called Fable and Southington. You might have heard about that store. And he offered to let me display some of those clocks for sale. Cool. And so I brought about 3 or 4 of my clocks there, and they're all priced about $275 a piece. And we're I'm just experimenting with that. I'm going to see how it goes. He said he's already had 2 possible buys or potential buys, so I'm hoping that'll go well. So yeah, if they do sell, then that's great. And there's a bunch of, I have connections like all over, local antique stores, and people know that I fix clocks. Antiques on the Farmington is a place that I go to a lot.
Yeah, that's a very prominent shop.
Fix clocks, and they offered to give me some shelf space. But the problem is I have so many clocks in the basement, and they're all at different stages of repair. So I have to have one clock, 100% complete and finished. And then that's when I'm ready to fix it. I guess that's where I'm like my own worst enemy is, I won't procrastinate. Like I'm always working on a new project, but I'm constantly acquiring new projects. So I'll buy this clock and I'll work on it. I'll take it apart, and then I'm like, okay, that's cool. So I'm working on that, and then I'll see this clock on Facebook Marketplace, and I'm like, I gotta get that. I
Gotta get that
clock.
one.
So I get that one, and then I'm working on this one, and then I go back to the one over there, and it's just I keep going in circles.
Now, what I predict then is you'll have to give up your desire to go to college in the fall. Well, actually this month, because you're gonna, you have this clock addiction now that's taking up every moment of your day and night. And so you're just gonna spend the rest of your life fixing clocks that you cannot help but want to buy and repair. Yeah. Or you can tamp that down and box it up a bit.
Yep.
And concentrate on your new studies. So what about the or part? How are you planning to, because I know enough about practice to know that you're not giving up clock repair. It's just not going to stop. It's similar to your dad's hobby in furniture, or any of us who started getting good at something, very good at something on our own terms. And I want to underscore that. No one said, you will do this or else, or this is your assignment. You just giving yourself this pleasure of seeing something that was busted and useless, telling time again. So that's not going to go away. But so now how do we put that into perspective with starting a whole new part of your life at school?
I'll tell you the truth. It's kind of a struggle wrapping my head around it. How I'm going to have to get used to this whole new mindset of, study and focusing my time towards that. But I'm trying, in various ways to try to finish up some projects in the basement and spend my time in better ways than, getting new clocks. Or if I do get a new clock, putting it in the corner and letting it be and finishing what I've already started.
Now that's an important change of your practice.
Yeah.
You'll still get the satisfaction. It won't be volume. It'll be quality. One clock instead of 10. Yeah.
It's quality no matter what. It's just, like I said, it take each one usually takes a lot of time, because I'll make a lot more work for myself than I have to.
Now the marketplace knows you're out there now, though. You got the store in Southington, you got the store in Farmington, you got some people on the web who are now more and more aware of you. Mm-hmm. So what about the option of apprenticing someone?
Apprenticing another person?
Another clock repair person who can work out of her or his
I still think
you could honestly, shop out some of this work.
Yeah, I still think I'm learning more and more about clock repair every day. And I have there's a man in California who I'm very good friends with, and we befriended each other through Facebook, and he's kind enough to provide me with a lot of tools and clock repair tools, and he's offering to teach me how to do various aspects of clock repair that I haven't learned yet. And one of the main ones being installing bushings, which is very important. And repairing an important skill when repairing antique clocks. And I haven't had the time this summer to really sit down with him and walk through, how to do that. But I'm hoping, eventually I'll be able to, have a couple days where we can just tinker with the movement and I can learn how to do that. But yeah, I think I'm still learning to this day, actually. Well,
I think that's a lovely thing. And I predict that you'll still be learning, as this person in California is, for the rest of time. And because there's so much to learn. But my question, perhaps I didn't say it clearly, was if you, in your own business here, small b right now, had some volume that you couldn't handle because you're starting a lot of work at school, is there some person who you could start teaching at least the very simple parts, like cleaning the ick off or something like that, so you could put more time into the higher end of your learning on the clocks as well as your college studies?
At this point, I haven't really thought about apprenticing someone else, I guess.
You have to be a very special person, and certainly someone with an enormous amount of patience and a high desire to learn what you know.
Yeah, exactly. That's the key. I have a very good friend who lives across the street, and he loves my hobby. He thinks it's super cool, but he's told me dozens of times, I would never have the patience for this. He'll go in the basement and he'll just kind of be like,
oh man,
I don't have the patience for this. And, my brother, he's got his own hobby with RC cars and all that. So,
all right. Well, just put a little bullet on the possibility that someday you're going to find someone, maybe at school, who's
hopefully,
says, I'm looking for someone who loves clock repair like I do. And you go, oh, I love clock repair. Oh, wow.
Awesome. I didn't even think about that. So you just.
Yeah. Well, it's about the shaping of your commitment to what I think is a high practice that you're going to continue to have, clock repair, with other things you're developing. So as we are coming to our last couple of minutes, we're talking about your choice of history. Does that go back to a point you made earlier in our conversation where you said, I like to feel that every clock I'm handling has a history, and I like to think about that. Is there a connection there?
There is a huge connection there, and there's connections with various things in state, like interests and hobbies I've had in my life. I've always had a very huge interest in historical buildings and historical events, historical people, pretty much anything historical, or, especially in American history. And, my dad and I, the last couple of years, have been trying to restore all the original wooden windows on our house. And we have about 3 windows left of 43 wooden sashes that we've restored. And I have a bunch of different interests that all kind of are in the general hub of history. And I feel like deep down, my whole mindset is oriented in that historical mindset, I guess. So.
And now that I can tell folks, while I said up front that you're 17, folks, he's really 77. This is an old man here.
Yes.
He's almost my age. This has all been a hoax, this whole conversation, because what person 17 has already developed in himself a real strong feeling for all things historical. I think it's tremendous, and I'm only teasing. I admire the heck out of the fact that you've caught on to not only the specific of clock repair and the whole domain of antique timepieces, but it puts you into the whole world that's very prominent in our part of the country, in Connecticut, which is appreciation of American history. I mean, we are the Constitution state. Yep. And there's going to be something very close at hand for you to appreciate, learn about. You're going to have some faculty who are at your school, particularly because they could come to Connecticut, which is so rich in history. And we have the Athenaeum and other institutions that have preserved a lot of American history. So I think you're going to have a wonderful 4 years.
Thank you.
And you're going to, after that, you're always going to have something on that bench. If not your dad's bench, you're going to have your own bench someday.
Yes.
I can see you now saying to your potential partner, now we've got to find a place to live where I can have a bench.
A bench. Yes, definitely.
So thank you, Gage Robertson. It's been really delightful to have this time to get to know you better. Everyone who said great things about you were absolutely right.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate that, Dave. It was a pleasure talking with you as well.
Thanks for listening to the Practice Podcast, where we discuss practice with a capital P. If you'd like to hear more, listen in on Spotify, Automatic, and Apple Podcasts, or go to enactionresearch.com/podcast-page. And if you'd like to learn more about social inaction and the nature of practice, head over to enactionresearch.com for more information. Thank you for supporting this show. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Oh, and one more thing. How could I forget? The book on practice as a way of being is available now in digital form, something that would be new like podcasting to many of us, and it's a great way of learning more and more about what this podcast presented when Peter Vale and I originated it several years ago. So please come to www.mylibrary.world/practice, and you'll see what I mean. Thank you.